Alright everyone, now it's time for the Occult video number 323. Was Apollonius of Tyana the template for Jesus, for the Jesus myth, if you happen not to believe he existed, or was just like some philosophical dude, or the story of Jesus Christ? Now, as a preface to this is not predominantly a moral religious argument that I'm making, so I'm not dumping on Christianity, because I know that there are quite a few people that watch me now, especially in the wake of the 2016 election, that are Christians. That's not the point. The point is the historicity of Jesus/Apollonius. And here's the problem. The problem boils down to the fact that the first mention of Jesus that you actually get is actually contemporary with the time in which Philostratus had released his material with regards to Apollonius, sort of his life and his wanderings. It comes initially, the first mention, other than Josephus, which that doesn't actually refer to Jesus Christ, to be clear, that's not real, is from Tacitus and comes from around 65 AD. If you look at the timeline, therefore, it is conceivable that Apollonius is a template upon which that story was actually based, that the early Gospels and so forth were influenced by that. Does this necessarily mean that the story itself is religiously unimportant? No. You can give it whatever importance you want. What I would say is that some people categorize Apollonius as being a Jesus-like figure, and then later, several centuries later, with the pagan revivalism you see around that time, the latter-day Roman Empire. That's also definitely possibly the case. And I think it would be amusing if you ended up with a situation where Apollonius lives and dies and so forth. That story gets adapted, or at least partially derived from, for the Jesus story. And then centuries later, the pagans readapt that same story using the initial Apollonius, who we know actually lived. We have historical documentation contemporary to his time period. We don't for Jesus Christ. The first writings come from decades after the supposed date of death, in the year 35. That would be interesting. It's also possible. Now, the problem rests in this. Here's the big problem. The problem with deciding that Apollonius is necessarily a template for Jesus, again, a possibility, is that the only real contemporary coverage that you get from it, it's not technically secondary, is from Philostratus. You have one particular document on Apollonius, and that's all. You get plenty of secondary analysis of it where people are talking about, well, did he really perform this miracle? Here's the opinions of Apollonius on some religious or spiritual concept. You only have that one particular work. And it's one that is self-professedly incomplete. Of course, it is literally noted within the writings that there were certain things that Apollonius, again, who we know existed, refused to divulge about his times, especially in India, among certain mystic groups. He was among various philosophical groups, various cults or religious sects, orders, in Egypt, in Persia, in the area controlled by the Hindus at the time, as well as among the Greeks, among the Jews. And you have the self-professed incomplete nature of the documentation of Apollonius. However, what has been posited is the idea that later on with Christianity, the Romans were facing a situation in which the empire was fractured along cult lines. You have the Mithra cult, which was very big in the military, actually. You have the Christian movement in various forms. You have mystic orders like the Essenes. You have the Egyptian religion. You have, and in its thousands of different sub-forms. You have Judaism. At one point, up to 10% of all of the citizens of the Roman Empire were Jews. You have all of these different philosophical orders. Nero persecuting the philosophers around the same time of Apollonius explicitly, and he had some things to say about old Nero as well. By the way, I love it when people in the postmodern sense try to reinterpret Nero and whitewash him. Oh, he wasn't actually that bad. A lot of that was just horseshit. Well, again, you have non-Christian sources and Christian sources alike, the latter being specifically persecuted under him, basically agreeing that he was nuts. You have plenty of historical accounts, both contemporary and thereafter, of course, mostly thereafter, because nobody wanted to be sent to the lions, that pretty much agree with Nero being a bad dude. Same about Caligula. People are trying to claim now that Caligula, oh, he wasn't really like rapacious and stuff. He was actually well liked. Yes, at first he was. But much like many other emperors, he quickly pissed that away through various behavioral meanderings. While it is probable that Caligula wasn't actually nuts enough to attempt to wage war on Poseidon and had his troops collecting seashells in the North Sea or whatever, that might be hyperbole. He was definitely a deviant of various kinds, and there was a reason for that, because he was although they think that he might have been drinking a little bit too much Falernian wine, which was boiled in lead pots and slowly gave him brain damage. It's sort of like the emperor there. Can't remember which one it was. You remember when there was the Justinian? That's it. The plague of Justinian comes. This is fall of Western Roman Empire has happened. And Justinian comes along, actually re-cements the hold over half of what had been the Western Roman Empire, the Mediterranean, once again a Roman lake. And then the plague breaks out. He gets the plague. His wife dies, first and foremost. He gets the plague, barely survives, and is driven mad. And then later on becomes more and more increasingly tyrannical over time. Nothing to do with Apollonius, just interesting Roman history. Apollonius, though, I think we cannot establish that he was the template for the Jesus story. That being said, it is a possibility. And some people have their faith shaken by the mere question. Other people look at it from a more academic perspective. Doesn't really have any spiritual meaning. It's just a matter of when we look at the Gospels, when we look at the story of Jesus, are you getting a pure account of a specific individual, or has it been influenced in some philosophical manner? The number of overlaps between the provably older story of Apollonius as recorded and what is the latter-day gospel materials, the earliest ones at least that we can physically document, is considerable. There are a considerable number of overlapping stories, things that are quite similar. That's evidence, but it's not proof of the idea of Apollonius as a template. And I know a lot of people, especially atheists, which is funny because, of course, Apollonius was definitely not atheistic. They swear to this and proclaim it to be true based on that timeline. It could be, though, that tomorrow you find some fragment of what became the Gospel of John in a cave somewhere that gets positively dated to 40 AD. So the archaeology in that region of the world, while substantial, is nowhere near complete. They find new ruins all over the world on a regular basis. Every decade you have some new Troy-level style find. It wasn't until recently that they verified, yeah, actually the Brazilian tribes there actually did build pyramids. Until recently, we had no idea that an area of the Amazon jungle the size of Great Britain is covered with terra preta, which had to require considerable organization over time to actually exist. Göbekli Tepe pushes back the human timeline thousands of years before initially it had been thought that people had the capability of constructing anything we would regard as megalithic. We now realize that it's not even one megalith, it's a whole complex, and it was supposedly built by people who had nothing more than wood and stone. I question whether that's actually the case. I think that it pushes back the origin of human technology and civilization further, and that we'll eventually have proof of that. I remember when Stonehenge was just a henge of stones. Now we know there's a second Stonehenge that was made of wood that was far beyond that, and there are other little megalithic sites scattered around too. That's the result of technology. So was Apollonius the template for Jesus? Maybe, and maybe not. And that's the occult truth. We're not sure yet. It's funny to see how many people, for religious reasons especially, will declare, yes, absolutely, there was no Jesus, it's Apollonius reinterpreted by the Romans, or no, that couldn't possibly be the case. The Jesus story, even though the Gospels contravene one another on multiple points, is ironclad and inescapable and divinely inspired. That's about all. Peace out.